All right, friends, welcome to another episode of the Innovation Lab. I am your host, Ali Papi, joined here with my co-host, Mr. Paul Martinez, and we're continuing our discussion around how to level up, what mindset shifts you need to make to grow in your career. And we're going to be doing things a little differently for this episode. We're going to be flipping the script. Paul and I joined an organization together. He started off as one of my resources, and very quickly, due to his mindset and skills, grew and outpaced his growth, and soon became my boss. And we wanted to discuss some of that, and hopefully you will take some nuggets from that discussion. So, Paul, you want to kick us off?
Yes. All right. So now I'm the one with the mic. So welcome, Ali.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Paul.
So tell us a little bit about yourself this time. Give
Oh
us
man, about myself. You gotta give me a
I
more
mean
directed
from a
question.
from a professional sense, a little bit of your background. How long have you been in this career? But what are some of the experiences that you've had?
Yeah. Um, so straight out of college, I have an engineering background, computer engineering. I was more drawn to the people aspect of things, how people come together, how they organize themselves to launch a product or set up a business, to grow an enterprise and command resources and grow influence. That sort of was my area. I knew that I didn't want to be tied to a cubicle. That I knew if I went into a cubicle, that will be the death of me, in back of my mind. So I knew I wanted a profession where I could get to travel and learn about different things, and that's what pushed me to consulting. The opportunity presented itself with Deloitte Consulting. I was there for 8 years or so. Worked with large corporations, understood some of what it means to have business processes and what are the different functions that make up a modern American enterprise. And then from there, I was like, I need to have my own enterprise. And I knew nothing really about startups, Bay Area culture, none of that.
Right.
And I said, okay, from the stories, blogs, what I've read was you got to all in, you got to be, balls to the wall. It's all in or nothing. So I said,
Right.
I got to be an effective entrepreneur, I got to leave no option left for me. I got to just jump in.
Burn
And
all
so I quit.
bridges, everything.
Huh?
Burn all bridges.
Burn all bridges. Exactly. That's exactly what it was. So my at that time I was consulting for Cisco, and I said, this is it. I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna develop a product, and it's gonna be a marketplace, and I'm gonna disrupt the consulting industry. These Deloitte guys, they don't know anything. BCG, Accenture, all of these large consulting corporations that are worth billions, they
Right.
they they don't have it. I can do a better job and I can deliver it more efficiently. And I jumped into that.
What
That
what would
didn't
you
work out too well.
what would you say was your value proposition that differentiated you from like Deloitte?
So it was, what was my real value proposition, or what I thought my value
Yes. So
proposition was?
there's your intention and then what's actually delivered.
Yeah. So my intention at that time, I think that is your question,
Yes.
was um, it's very relationship driven business.
Mm,
The directors and partners of Deloitte have personal connections with industry leaders that are trying to get an initiative, product, transformation happen, and it's all driven by that. Um, why not make it automated? I thought technology was the solution here. I saw that there was a problem, which was you're not letting meritocracy rise, meaning you should be able to put a problem out, and as a RFP, request for proposal, and the best proposal that comes in should win, and should take shape. But the problem with that was I didn't really understand how 0 to 1 products worked, how to actually. I didn't have a business background. I didn't do an MBA. I had the opportunity for MBA, but I said, I don't need an MBA because I'm gonna launch my own business and learn along the way. You know,
Nice.
so there's a lot of missing pieces that I thought would magically just sort of fall
Align.
in place, and of course they didn't for most part.
Got it. Got it. I see. Well, I mean, you had the right intentions, right?
Yeah, but yeah, intentions don't
They don't always.
equal results, right?
They don't always.
Yeah, so yeah.
Well, let's let's shift gears here a bit and maybe take that mindset and kind of talk about the experiences that you and I shared, right? Because we started at this company at around the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's see. You were leading a project, a pretty important one, right? I was assigned to you by my manager to help you out. And
Mm-hmm.
so maybe tell us a little bit about that experience, right? Like, I when I when I came in to help you, um, I observed your leadership. I observed how you operated, and I wanted to be the best individual contributor that I could be. Um, maybe you can expand on the experience because we worked together. You were heading this up, and there were several other people. Maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so for the initiative where you and I and a whole bunch of other people work together, um, I was brought in to um, head up this cleanup effort for our data, for to have a pretty important for the company filing done, um, and I saw that as an opportunity. Uh, I was hungry off of this perceived, failure of my startup, and I said, if I'm going back, my mindset was, if I'm going back in the corporate world, I gotta I gotta boss it up. Like, if I'm gonna go in, I need to have my piece. What is my piece? Um, and
When you say
I was still driven by service mentality, but not necessarily by that what is the best for necessarily best for the business. There was a lot of what power can I garner here? How can I establish my domain that's going to be mine? I needed an empire,
right, right. So when you say your piece, you mean carve out a little space that you can maybe run and operate
Correct.
business. Interesting, interesting.
And it didn't matter what it was. It it needed to be like, here is the boss of this, and he's got. It was very much driven by, I think, perception, almost like I needed to be able to go, I have X number of people, and this is mine. This is what I am responsible for, and I wanted to be rewarded for that.
Got it, got it. Well, let me ask you one thing. So, I mean, I worked with you and for you for it's like a good 6 to 8 months, right?
Probably
Something like
longer.
probably
Uh,
longer than that.
yeah, almost a year, I would say. Yeah.
It's a year. So this whole time I'm working for you, how did you perceive me operating?
So I didn't see that you were working for me. I saw you as, oh, here is a representative from this division, and he's got specialized knowledge in an area which I frankly didn't understand. So I'm gonna rely on him as an advisor, um, and get just I want to get the deliverable behind me. Like I want to check mark so I can
Mhm.
make a case for, hey, give me give me a make me a lord,
That's pretty interesting.
I've won this battle for you, general. Make me a lord.
Got it. Got it. Just like in the movies, right?
Right. Game of Thrones, or yeah, whichever war movie you see. Yeah.
Right. So, um, so we worked together. I recall it was getting close to finishing up, right? The project. And over the course of and span of that time, we both saw kind of the same things, right? That this group that we were heavily leveraging, that essentially had to drive those changes, um, and improvements through their system and their people, that they needed help, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I recall this one day when we were sitting, in one of the buildings, and you shared with me that you wanted to take this group on, right? Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I was brought in for initially for the cleanup piece and an ERP implementation. We were using SAP, uh, and the idea was when this grows, this will be sort of the business systems are going to be mine. It's going to be at the intersection of business and IT. And long story short, because of the state of the business, and leadership, our SAP implementation, the main driver that I was looking at, got scrapped. That was no longer in play, and I was fighting for survival. And I said, "What are other big problems?" Oh, it's this group here that that is a constant problem that's being raised by leadership across the enterprise, um, and let me let me take that on, and let me be the hero. Like I can do this. Like I and the problem with that was I didn't fully understand it, um, but I was like, this is I didn't know who was gonna give. I didn't understand who could give me the keys to that piece of the business.
Mm-hmm.
That was the other problem.
Right.
I didn't understand how the system was laid out, um, how the enterprise was laid out fully. But I was like, okay, I gotta talk to a whole bunch of people, and just I gotta get this, and this could be the thing. This could be the next thing that I can take on.
Right. Right. I recall sitting in that meeting, a little bit of background. I That team was owned by someone in my organization, and as I was working with you in the background, I was also capturing a lot of the things that I had noticed that were kind of problematic, that were more systematic, um, issues that wouldn't just be resolved by sending someone to just training. And it was large, it was big, and I myself didn't want to take that group on. My management had started discussing with me, can you help the group out? And I came to the company to drive innovation and a bunch of other stuff. I didn't really want to join that. So as I was sitting there listening to you, I was thinking, well, maybe I could help Ali take the group on, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the things that was running through my mind. Um, and then things started to change in the company, right? Over time. Um, there were talks about headcount reductions, right? Over time. I think that happened, several months after we had that conversation. Not that long after, right?
Yeah, it was pretty close to it. Yeah.
Pretty close to it. Um, Let me ask you this. When you joined the company, did you do you have a process of what you do when you come in? Or do you just jump in and start getting to work and and drive at just the things that either your management or their management are seeking for you to do? Do you have any process?
Yeah, good question. So it's you want to understand what is it expected of you. And I think one thing that I had learned at Deloitte was sort of exceed clients' expectation, exceed your how you want to drive is what can I do to exceed expectations? And that was sort of part of that was ingrained in me to figure out what is the expectation and
Mhm.
can I subvert that and exceed that. And when and at the time I joined, I said, okay, I want to get there as early as possible. Um, I want to I want to show that I'm dialed in. I want to show that I'm driving everything on my own. And so it's about the optics of it. It's about attitude, and over time, and this is after working there and uh, you and I talking and all of that. The systemization that did not occur to me at that time when I was starting off, which was understand the domain concept. Um, I was very much driven still by an initiative mindset that we have at this initiative. Let's get it done. What is required to get it done? Not so much um, that when you're joining an enterprise, you're part of a business, you have a small piece of the business, you try to understand what is downstream to you, what is upstream to you, what are your deliverables, what is feeding into you, who are
Mhm.
your customers, who are your suppliers. All of
Yeah.
that was not really I
Where
wasn't
did
mm-hmm.
where did you get all that from? Like those
which
concepts,
which part?
the domain concepts, the supplier, customer, deliverables, receivables. I mean, you had been aware of those throughout your career, right? You've engaged in
Yeah.
those.
um
Yeah.
Not in a corporate setting. In many ways, it's weird, but in many ways, this was my first full-time job because I started my career as a consulting, and it was a initiative driven that we're gonna do process redesign work for order to cash. Okay, this is the mission. Let's get it done.
Mhm.
Um, and that that was a large part of my career. And then I went into independent consulting with Cisco, whatnot, and then I launched my startup. So I had never really um, put the pieces of the puzzle because I had never been a here's your function
Yeah.
within an enterprise, and this is what you're responsible for. I saw that as almost going into the cubicle. So I avoided it. Like Cisco was saying, why are you a contractor? Do you want to be a full-time employee? And I assumed in my mind that was they're gonna put me in a cubicle. They're gonna
Right.
that's I'm gonna die there. That's not what I want. So I never fully developed that prevented me from understanding this domain theory.
Well, that
Um,
the domain theory, I mean, no one really teaches that per se, right? Like it's not, highly intentional. That's kind of something that I developed. I built a model around it, because if you're running a business within a business, which is what a domain is, and I mean, believe me, I went through over 2 decades of my career, and it doesn't always click with people, right? That you are literally running a business within a business,
mhm,
and a corporation may have the engineering business and the manufacturing business and the purchasing business and all of these little businesses, like a town of a bunch of businesses, and they all have to work together,
yeah,
and they are all suppliers and customers to each other, and they all deliver and receive um, content from and to each other. That's not, not everyone immediately gets that, right? And so that's why I just wanted to understand if it was something that you had either come to see or slowly developed it.
yeah. I think it clicked with working with you. Um, it seemed like, of course, it's that way, but
Yeah.
I wasn't intentional about it. That let me try and understand my domain. I think it was. I think I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was because it's in hindsight you always forget things, right? Like I I I think it was just limited before working with you, limited to just let's exceed expectations. Let's figure out what the expectations are and try to exceed it and put the best foot forward, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I see. Yeah. I mean, I built a model. Um, I call it intra-business domain theory. You know, it's basically just how you operate a business, but it uses a lot of the terminology that you use if you are a group within a corporation. Um, and it's very intentional. The goal behind it is so that you understand that you are kind of the CEO of your little domain,
Yeah.
and since you are supposed to be the CEO of this domain, what are the things that you're supposed to do, right? And so you identify internal customers and suppliers, set up agreements with them. You've got shareholders and stakeholders, um, and then you've got whatever you do within your domain or the box, and then
Yeah.
you've got this 360-degree um, set of influence, right? The boundary of influence, where you seek to influence the people above you, your customers and suppliers, and the people below you, so that ultimately you have a grasp on ensuring that you are delivering good content to whoever your internal customers are, and that you're setting good quality metrics around whatever you're supposed to receive. You don't just allow junk to come into your domain. You set up agreements to make sure that you're getting stuff that is, you know, good, so that your domain can work with it.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever hear about that anywhere else that you've been at?
Not formalized in this way. We, being in consulting for a long time, from a project delivery standpoint, yes.
Hmm.
You break it down into vision, planning, designing, building, delivering, operating, and then continuous improvement cycle of
Mhm.
any initiative. But not as a this is your domain and how to operate it like a business. Um, that was I didn't come across that. I don't know
Okay.
if that's part of like do you think that's taught in MBA?
Not really. No, because I've taken a lot of different MBA courses. Um, this is it's a combination of behavioral psychology, communications, entrepreneurship,
Systems engineering.
yeah, systems
Mhm.
engineering. So it's a big Frankenstein of a bunch of the stuff. But you tend to come across it,
Mhm.
like when you hear people say, "Oh, stay in your lane." What do they mean by that? Right? Like, oh, I don't want to step on engineering's toes, or I don't want to step
Mhm.
on their toes, right? Like you start to hear, little concepts that tell you that there are things that group does, and that's what they're in charge of, and then things that you do and you're in charge of. So there seems to be this imaginary boundary, right?
Yeah.
And and that's, they it is referred to as a functional domain or functional business domain. um it goes by many terms, but as far as the mechanics of it and the dynamics, how do you operate it, there isn't anything that's very intentional out there around this today.
Mhm.
um
It's sort of self-discovered,
yeah,
and apprenticeship sort of passes it on, but it's not formalized as a discipline.
yeah. So I want to share with the listeners, right? What can you do to level up? That's kind of what we
Mhm.
decided we wanted to turn this to, and I wanted them to hear from you firsthand, because you came into the company, you're driving this initiative. I think that uh, there were opportunities that presented themselves. I was not wanting that opportunity. You were wanting the opportunity, and then over time there were some shifts. Um, in the background, let me share with you what I was doing, right?
Mhm.
I've been at, going into this company, I had been at around 5 companies now and consulted for 6 companies, and long term, and then, a bunch of others for just very short term, 1 or 2 days. But, you know, when you leave a company and you join another company, uh, there's there's going to be things that you are responsible and accountable for, um, that the company that you left, they were certain things, and the company that you're joining, they're going to be other things. They may be the same, but they may be a little different as well. You may have different internal customers and suppliers,
Mhm.
or types from the company that you
Yeah.
left.
Depending on the industry that you're joining, that there will be these differences.
Even in the same industry, because sometimes companies are organized a little different. So the first thing that you have to do is understand what is your domain. And that means, what am I going to be responsible and accountable for? Who are my internal customers and suppliers? What are going to be my receivables and deliverables? Who are my stakeholders and shareholders, right? Like my boss, my boss's boss, my peers, maybe the people, that if they're going to report up into your chain, or you have to work with other people that are, maybe not at your level, but um, lower individual contributor levels. What is the communication? That's probably the biggest one. Where are you going to get your communication from? How are you going to receive communication, from the top, from the bottom, and sideways? And then how are you expected to communicate outward? Again, to the top, sideways, and
Mhm.
below you. And that's basically, now you get an idea for what your domain is. That's step one. And then step two is, don't do anything beyond that. Adopt and adapt to the status quo. You have to know how things are operating, right? At that point, like, you learn about the company, how it operates, and attain some level of proficiency in what you're supposed to do. And then you identify inconsistencies, because that leads you up into step three, which is clearing up any gray areas where you see gaps or overlaps, in the groups that your group is supposed to function in, or maybe even other groups. And this happens through having discussions with people above you. You start building relationships with people above you and beside you, and below you. And because you are going to be in charge of a domain, it's at this point that you start also negotiating, with groups, because there may be gray areas around who's going to be in charge of this. Is it your group or is it another group? And so you start having negotiations, so you can start to draw boundaries around your domain to understand this is what I'm going to be in charge of. When I first started, I didn't have a domain, so I was constructing a couple of domains. And then you step back and identify probably the most key and important feature, which is, step 4 is, what should my business domain be? In other words, if this domain is coming out of nowhere because they're just, filling a position, or if it did exist, regardless, what should this domain be? Because, there may be some expectations, your management or your boss may say, hey, we want you to be able to do this.
Mm-hmm.
But they may not be attuned to the reality of, well, that's what you say that you want, but let me show you what you may really need, and that leads into step 5, right? Because in order for you to answer what should my business domain be, the big question is, what is it that my customers need, and how am I underserving um, my customers, and then what do I need to do to work with my internal suppliers so that I make sure that
Mm-hmm.
whatever comes into my domain is solid, rock solid, right? If you
These are
know,
customers of the domain, not your end customers we're talking about.
correct.
Mm.
Yeah. And so at the end of the day, it's at that point that you're ready to start to design and develop methods that can get you to what your domain should be. You come up with ideas, right? Like, I think, some of the things that that came out of, us working together. I transformed a group from being this group to something different. You know, it's really the same group, same people, but because I sent them to training, I changed the name of the group. I basically I drove transformation, but it was more of how it appeared to transform. There wasn't much to transform. We were still using the same systems, same tools, same people, right? But I had to drive a mental transformation. In other words, the customers of this group had to see it as, this is a new group with, new processes, new capabilities, complete transformation. But you and I both know it wasn't that drastic, right? um, there was just a little bit of organization, a little bit of training, and a lot of marketing, right? um, and then whatever you decided to design and develop, those methods, you pilot some, you know you pilot little pieces here and there to see what works, and the ones that take, then you drive scaling. You want to now grow those capabilities out, and the ones that fail, you kind of bury them and move on. And that's step 6. You implement, test, and modify these methods. And then the last step 7, whatever little pilot programs did work, then you market and socialize those methods, you acquire further buy-in, and then you scale it up, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and take it out to the masses. And then step 8, you rinse and repeat. You do the whole thing over again. And those are the things that I think anybody can do. But if you don't have a process, then you're kind of shooting in the dark. You're kind of trying to figure out as you go. And it's the same thing that I did at maybe the last 2 companies that I worked at. Um, and it's not about giving your boss or your management what they want. It's about giving the business what it needs. That's, I think, the big key
Mm-hmm.
area.
Which is the tough part, right? That requires you to really dig deep and spend the energy. And most people are not built for that.
Yeah. Building the relationships, right? Because I think you recall, what was the most important thing that you have to garner from all the relationships that you build? What do I call that?
Garner.
Yeah, relevance,
Okay.
right? The relevance, because relevance in a business is always changing. If you want to establish a track record of delivering desired results for a business, it can't come from just you, right? Every single one of us perceives the business in its own way, but what really matters is what the business needs. So there's what I think it needs, and then there's what it actually needs. And I don't have a crystal ball. I don't think anybody does. And so no one's going to nail it right on the head and say, hey, this is what it needs. We have to go out there and get it. And what that means is you start building relationships across the entire enterprise. Above you,
Mm-hmm.
your boss's peers, the people, beside you, your peers, and then other people, at lower levels and their peers. And you start to understand where things are going well, where things are not going so well, where things may be going too well and there's overlaps and too many resources are being
Mm.
pumped into a certain location, or where there are gaps. And once you start to see this, then you start to see what is relevant to the needs of the business. Um, and and over time, it usually takes a little bit of time, at least 2 years typically. You see how the business has changed and how it has progressed, and you start to see a trajectory of what's relevant. And then in that trajectory, you can pretty much estimate where the like Wayne Gretzky used to say, what do you say? What makes him a great player?
Yeah, that he knows where the puck is going to be. He
Exactly.
doesn't go to where the puck is. He goes to where the puck is going to be. Something to that effect.
And
Mm.
that's what you do in
Mm.
business, right?
Yeah.
You don't go to where it's at, because by the time you get to it, it's gone. You have to go to where it's going to be. And so by garnering a historical relevance, then you can build a trajectory and you know that it's going to be here. And that's what you shoot for. That's what you show management. I need funding. This is what we need to do. Because if we don't do this, these are the opportunities that we're going to lose, and these are the threats that we will be facing. Right. And when you do that, that's what makes you valuable to a business. Because at that point, you're not just giving someone something that they want, and that gives you these, that'll give them these feel good chemicals. You
Mhm.
show them, what they need and the threat that they're going to avoid. So they get to experience both the feel bad chemicals saying, oh my God, that's true. This could happen. And then they see the solution that you're proposing, or
Mhm.
series of solutions that you're proposing. And at that point, they start to feel like you got to be part of this tribe.
So to summarize, your management, your leadership, you're giving them what they need. That garners even a biochemistry level. They're getting the feel good chemicals that this person is gonna help us avoid a threat, and then you become part of their tribe. It builds that trust, and that propels you. That carries your domain forward, and you're able to deliver better.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not just the feel good, it's the feel bad as well, right? Like you can't just deliver the feel good. If I do something that my boss wants, he's just going to get feel good chemicals. Well, everybody does that, right?
Yeah.
But when you deliver something that they need, when they are able to understand and comprehend that there's a potential threat or major missed opportunity, they get the anxiety, the feel bad chemical, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and then you deliver the feel good
I
chemical as well.
wonder if you could somehow synthesize it. We're all looking for easy answers. If you could synthesize it and spray it on your boss. That love potion almost, but in a corporate setting.
Yeah. I mean, it's the worst thing that you could possibly do is create a problem and then come in and solve it, right? The reality is that you need to go in and discover something that is necessary. right? That nobody really knows is needed by the business. And that requires a lot of deep reflection, a lot of deep relationship building with individuals across a company, so that you can deeply understand what is really needed. And then once you pull that information, you start to see where the patterns are. Where do they exist?
Mhm.
You know?
So unpack that for me a little bit, that relationship building piece of it. Sounds like that is a key, other than the reflection and having a process and vision for this. If you're going in, how much time are you dedicating? What percentage, or how are you reaching out to people? What are you talking to them about? How are you
Mm.
able to extract this information? Are you getting it on this first conversation, or is it first conversation is introductory and you do a follow on? People, of course, only want to dedicate time if if it seems productive. If it's just a sort of like a social conversation, they may not want to continue it. Yeah, so unpack that piece.
So the same way that I worked with you, right? I came in to help you. And I did the same with about four other groups. I was helping four other groups at the same time, right? I had told my boss, I get it. These are the things that you want me to work on. How about we do this? You know, there are some pretty, you're having trouble working with these other groups. Let me spend time and serve these other groups a bit. And that's what I did.
Mm.
I spent time working with some of the directly responsible individuals. They didn't understand the design a bit. I spent some time training them on that. I was starting to help people out. And in the process of helping them out, either understand what the design was or what certain groups or functions do because they came from a completely different industry, whatever I had to offer, I gave. And in doing so, we start building a repertoire, over time. You start to kind of, the same way you and I had a really good relationship, I had really good relationships now over time because I started to foster them. I'd spend time at least 3, 4 days a week with about 18 to 20 people, and then it would shift every now and then, because sometimes it would move up and I'd be,
Mm-hmm.
spending more time with their management,
And
because
in
they.
your mind, what is the ultimate goal here? What is driving you to do this,
Mm,
even though in that moment you're not getting an immediate return or something back?
the goal is to understand the needs of the customer. Because remember, I was going to be driving innovation. And so I needed to understand what were some of the things that they needed, what would help
Mm-hmm.
them, because at the end of the day, whenever you drive to make a change, um, you're going to have to get buy-in from other groups, right? And so I was already building my circle of influence, the individuals that were going to be who had the power to approve things. I was spending the time with them because I can't just, again, in engineering, design something that, maybe, that group and marketing, them two alone decide, hey, this is what we want to do. And then you force feed it to the rest of the groups, right? When you try to force feed these things,
Mm-hmm.
they don't go so well, right? Because some groups needed heavy process, other groups were okay with no process, you know.
Yeah.
So you start to understand what do these individuals need so that their domain can operate as effectively as possible when it gets hit with your deliverables into their domain and they become their receivables, right? It's understanding your customers, right? And it's not necessarily voice of the customer here. It's deeply understanding what is it that they need from you.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's a key insight, Paul, because a lot of people that try to do what you were able to do, um, we work with a lot of people that did not survive, that wanted to come in, and they may have had the right intentions, but they had the wrong process to actually make a difference. They went about force feeding they had a vision of how things should be, maybe from their previous domain, from a previous company, and they said, this is what I want to drive towards. Let me get buy-in from the VP or the C-suite folks. This is how it needs to be, rather than understanding how you can make a change happen in the current way of working.
So it's funny that you say this because I used to be one of those people, right? I think until I had kids and I realized, right, with a child, you can't just put food in front of them and tell them eat that, right? You have to get creative. You have to, maybe put the food on a spoon and it's a little plain and you got to fly it into their mouth, right? Like you have to get creative. And that's really what this is all about is how do you make them feel like you are being of service to them? And it has to be genuine. You have to be of service to these individuals because at the end of the day, the overall organization is in service of a mission, and that mission is driving some kind of a medium, whether it's a product or a service. It's this medium that gets a job done for some people, right? A customer. And imagine if you went out and you told your customer, hey, this is what you're going to use, this is how you're going to. That's not a very democratic society, right? There are names for those societies, right? Where
Canada.
I don't know. I just say that in a free market, people have options and choices. Well, the same thing goes within a company, right? Because if you have enough people and you piss enough people off, then they're gonna create options and choices. And at that point, you and or your group are out. That's what it comes down to. And so it's not necessarily a favors game. It's truly being of service to these groups. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
So I think I had a pleasure working with you. It was actually, now that I recall, closer to a year, right? We had some good times. It would have been great if we could have just kept doing that all along. It was definitely a lot more less stress than what goes on in the company these days.
That's the one of those lessons in life, right? Like nothing is constant, other than the change itself. That is the only constant. So yeah. So if you want to summarize, I think what we are talking about is not only just to how to level up, but the marketing name for this episode is going to be how to become your boss's boss. So it can be explained through that domain theory, meaning you understand what goes on. You give your real customers, which are your bosses, what they need. In doing so, you get their respect. You become part of their tribe, and that's how you actually level up. Which is, when you came into the piece, I was sort of scrambling. I was like, how do I clean up these bill of materials? And what is it engineering do? What is a process? How they get generated? A lot of it, there was a lot of missing pieces because I was never a true engineer working on hardware products. So that knowledge helped me, and I said, okay, I can rely on this guy. He's gonna show me the way, and so and he is easy to work with, that kind of thing. That's one aspect of it, and the other aspect is knowing that you're serving to a mission, and you're there, keeping the ego aside, keeping your personal agendas aside, because just like with anything in life, you chase it, it is fleeting. You chase love, it runs away. You chase money, it runs away. You chase a relationship, they're like, this person tries too hard. You
Right.
know, we pick up on that. We don't like it as human beings.
Yeah.
So you approach it from a service mentality, from a mentality that I'm here to serve, I'm here to learn, um, and you'll have a better success of working with a large number of people and accomplishing the team's goal and your personal goals.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the two most important things are you got to stay open and willing to change.
Mm.
That's one key.
Being adaptable.
Yeah. And then the
Mm.
second one is that you have to seek to understand.
Mm.
And that's a very big one because there's always conflict. There are always going to be people who have different methods or beliefs or ways of doing things. So you have to seek to understand what is it that they are truly getting at, right? Because sometimes people will ask for something and that's not really what it is that they want. They want something that is one layer deeper, right? Like, for example, the classic job to be done scenario. Like, give me a drill. I need a 1/4 inch drill. What they really
Mm.
want is a 1/4 inch hole.
Mm.
They're looking to make a 1/4 inch hole, yet they keep asking for a 1/4 inch drill or drill bit. You give them that, and then all of a sudden they don't know how to use a drill, right? So at the end of the day, you got to seek what is it that they're truly trying to get to. What is the emergent benefit that they're trying to arrive at? And sometimes that in order to do that is you just have to ask a lot of questions and be very, very patient.
Good. Got it. Yeah. Wonderful. I will try to summarize that, and have it on the screen so that when people are listening in, they can see the 8 steps that were outlined. Um, Maybe turn that into even a post so that, it's easy for for people to read with. They don't want to spend an hour going through this.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think the precursor to those 8 steps is understand that the domain that you came from, I mean, this may not apply to fresh grads or people new to the business world, but if you worked somewhere else and you're going into a similar type job function in this new company, you cannot take what you did before and directly drop it into this. It's not going to fit,
mhm.
you know. You are not a one size fit all solution. You know,
Yeah.
cultures are going to be different. The deliverables are going to be different. The what you're responsible and accountable for is going to be different. The domain boundaries are going to be, there's so much different. So you have to understand the domain first, right? That's the
Mhm.
first thing you have to do is understand what you're going to be in charge of. um, Adopt it, learn it, spend time with the people around it, and then at that point you start going through the remainder of those steps.
Yep. Awesome. Good stuff, Paul. We'll continue this hopefully. And any last words or anything?
um, no, I think there is one fundamental thing that you and I talked about it earlier today, which is drinking the Kool-Aid of a business, right? Maybe that's something else that could be explored in it,
Mm,
right?
that's
Because
it. That's an important one. Maybe we talk about that.
yeah,
Sneak peek: how to drink the Kool-Aid and like it.
yeah, how to drink the Kool-Aid and like it, right? Because if anyone who has ever driven massive innovation, whether it's a philosopher or an engineer or a scientist, they believed in something that was bigger than them, and they believed it so richly, so deeply, that it became part of their persona. It became part of who they are and how they operate. And so they were not self-seeking. They were out there driving at this thing that they were trying to do. And
Mhm.
that's the differentiator between people who are trying to empire building companies and trying to have
Yeah.
people report to them and all that stuff,
Yeah.
and someone who's just going to focus on the mission And when they're driving at that mission and they're a big believer of it, all of a sudden they'll look back and there's people behind them, following them, pushing them upward, pushing them forward, because that's how it works. When you
Yeah.
become a missionary of something bigger than yourself, people will follow.
Don't be an empire builder, be a missionary.
Yeah.
Be like Jesus. We're gonna stay away from religion, obviously, but yeah, there's lessons to be learned in everything, and especially in this analogy. So we'll talk more about that. Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you to our viewers for dialing in for another episode. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Okay. Take care, Ali.
Take care. Bye.